other people do it. But for me, the way I build trust is somebody tells me something that I know that they know that I don't want to hear, right? Like if I ask, my girlfriend, like, hey, did you, how many guys have you had sex with? And she tells me, 78. Like, I'm gonna be pretty sure that she's telling me the truth, right? Because it's not like usually a number that you want to hear. Like,
if you're going to sort of have a straightforward actual discussion on this character and ethics and moral behavior, first of all, how can he not be in this? I'm not defending him. I'm just going through this.
Okay, this is going to be another how to tell the difference video, and this one's going to be about how to tell the difference between ESTP and ISTP. So this is actually not that hard to do because one is a sensing dominant and the other is thinking dominant. But for some reason, if you look at the online community, there seems to be I don't know, a little bit of confusion going on there, and some people have a hard time telling the difference. So I'm going to go over some observations that you can make that make it, easier to tell the difference, I guess, if you're having problems there. So for the beginning of this section, I'm going to have already played, if you're at this point, I'm going to have already played some snippets from the ESTP video clips that I'm going to use of celebrities talking so that you can actually refer to some real life examples after you listen to my descriptions. And then after that, I'm going to play examples from ISTP celebrities. And so you can go and compare and contrast. You can also go back to the Instagram and check out additional examples. These 2 examples for each type aren't the only ones that I have. Okay, so starting with ESTP, they're extroverted sensation dominant people. What does that mean? So they're really focused on things that, you gather with the 5 senses. So very concrete observations. That's what they're focused on. And then the things that they're paying attention to and the observations that they're emphasizing, they're going to be guided by personal logic. So whatever subjective rules they've made up, so whatever their thinking structure is. I don't know, we can use the example of like the traffic laws. So say you see a red light, like you're supposed to stop at a red light because if everybody doesn't stop at a red light, it can cause accidents. That's more like extroverted thinking. So SETI is like not really caring about like the traffic lights per se, like green, yellow, and red, because it's a rule. It's more like, okay, well, at this stoplight, I usually stop at a red light because every time I'm there, I see a car accident or something, so I'm more likely to stop at a certain intersection at a red light because I usually see car accidents there. So there's the concrete observation, and then the explanation is going to be guided by whatever subjective thinking that person has. So with these people, that's something you're going to encounter like all the time. So for a bunch of different circumstances, they're going to have gone through and thought about things in their own way. So like I said, I use the traffic laws, and I think I'll keep that for the other section too. Like the traffic laws, a lot of people are just like, well, I just stop at a red light because that's what you're supposed to do. These people are going to think about it themselves. In every situation, they're going to do that, or in a lot of them. And then occasionally the other side that you're going to see, so the first thing you're going to notice is that the person's really focused on concrete perceptions. And then the other thing you're probably going to notice if you spend more time around them is that they're going to be really focused on their own quality of life, but from a practical decision making standpoint. So in the 2 clips, I have Sean Connery talking about why the character of James Bond does what he does, and you can see he just goes through rationally. He goes through point by point what the interviewer is asking to set himself at ease, and the same behavior is shown in the clip with Dan Bilzerian. That's going to be the second one, where he literally just sits down and goes through point by point, why he does what he does, and he's giving himself peace of mind by explaining why he does what he does in a non-sensationalized manner. So as I said before, the first thing you're going to notice is that they're people that frequently emphasize concrete observation, and they're very logical about doing so. And then the other thing you're going to notice when you get to know them better is that they really like to remain factual, and they don't really emphasize their personal passions. This is just something that you'll get the sense that they really don't value how they personally feel about something when making decisions. You're not going to hear this right away when you're talking to them, but after a while of getting to know somebody like this and taking into account, what they're normally doing and how they talk to you and how they talk to other people, this just becomes something that's apparent. So to sum this up, you're going to notice that they avoid their own personal passions and they don't like talking about that, but they really like to be thorough when it comes to being on rational terms. So they'll explain things, rational terms a lot, but they're really not going to tell you their personal opinion. They're just not going to emphasize that. Or even if they do, they're going to try and give you reasons. They're not going to try and tell you in emotional terms about their opinion. They're going to try and reason with you. So yeah, that's definitely one observation that you can really pinpoint someone's type with if you're looking for somebody that's ESTP over ISTP. So as I said before, another side to them that you'll notice is that they like to set themselves at ease by talking about rational things and by being very practical. And if you get to know them on those terms, if you get to know them that well, where you start to see things like this, you're also going to be surprised by how open-minded they can be, because they seem very concrete and they like to discuss concrete things and, make concrete observations and base most of their life around that. You'll be surprised that they can have a lot of alternative viewpoints on things, and especially things that seem abstract. Maybe like conspiracy things, or I don't know, religion, or whatever strange things that you wouldn't expect to be in normal conversation. They tend to bring things like this up, and it's surprising because they're very concrete. And it doesn't have to be something that's necessarily metaphysical or philosophical. A lot of people, when they think extroverted intuition, they think it has to be something supremely abstract. And that's not really the case. It's just that they're going to bring up something that's alternative. So an alternative viewpoint that you wouldn't expect somebody that's that concrete and that's that focused on whatever their five senses are telling them. You wouldn't expect them to bring up something that alternative. So I think in both of these examples that I'm showing, the two celebrities are bringing up something that the interviewer is obviously like, okay, that came out of left field. Like, you can tell that's the feeling in the room. That's the atmosphere that's going on there. And that's something that indicates extroverted intuition, rather than someone talking about something that's philosophical. It doesn't have to be some huge abstract idea like religion or anything like that to be extroverted intuition. All right, so let's sum up what you're looking for the ESTP clips that I'm going to play. You're looking for someone that frequently emphasizes concrete observations and their own personal logic, so their own personal explanations for things. And they like to set themselves at ease by talking about things rationally and going through things very thoroughly. And you'll get the impression that they're very logical, but they're not very passionate people. So they're very focused on their own subjective interpretation of things and their own subjective thinking interpretation of things, but they're not very emotionally opinionated, and they're not going to stick their neck out for even their own, personal moral stances or personal emotional stances. They don't really care about those things over logic. They're really more logical. And you can't forget that the other cool thing to look out for is that they're people that are very concretely focused, but at the same time they'll bring up alternative perspectives that come out of left field. So that's something to look out for too.
How other people do it, but for me, the way I build trust is somebody tells me something that I know that they know that I don't want to hear, right? Like if I ask, my girlfriend, like, hey, did you, how many guys have you had sex with? And she tells me, 78. Like, I'm going to be pretty sure that she's telling me the truth, right? Because it's not like usually a number that you want to hear. Like, not that I'm like, talking girls that slept with 78 guys. But the point is that, or for instance, if I ask them like, hey, what did you do last week? And they say, oh, I had sex with 2 guys. Well, I'm like, unless she's saying that to like make me jealous, like I'm going to know that she's telling me the truth, because that's not something that somebody would lie about. Right. So that's, in the same way when she asked me like, oh, do you have sex with this girl? And I say, yes. Like now I feel like she knows that she can trust me more, because it's like, okay, well, what's he going to lie about if he said yes to that? So I think there's like some appeal in the honesty.
Kills other men without conscience, who makes love to women without love, and yet millions of people love him. Have you figured out why?
If you're going to sort of have a straightforward actual discussion on this character and ethics and moral behavior, first of all, how can he not be in this, I'm not defending him, I'm just going through this, in this league that he is playing in? After all, what is sort of life and death, as they say. He doesn't make any passes or make love to women who are already married, which I suppose is something. Yes, well, and also the league he's in is life and death, as I say, and rather sudden. why should he have any conscience when the people that are involved in the same league don't have conscience either?
Okay, now we're moving on to ISTPs, which are introverted thinking dominant people. So this is why I'm like confused. I don't even know how people get ISTPs mixed up with ESTPs, because they're really, they're really different. Like somebody that's ESTP is probably going to be more, have more in common with somebody that's ISTJ than somebody that's ISTP, because they're both sensing dominant. Whereas like someone that is ISTP has a lot in common with somebody that's INTP, over somebody that's like ISTJ. But I digress. I should probably talk about what I have listed on the slide.
And what I do is designed for people who like it, not for people who don't. And I have no desire to inflict it on people who don't want to consume it.
Do you have a perception of what it is they want?
No, I think the only thing they expect is they expect to be entertained.
So on the slide I wrote, these people, the first thing you're going to notice is that they frequently emphasize their own subjective logical structure, which is guided by concrete observations. So that's like everything to these people flows from what they think about it. And it's like what they think is very structured and it's very coherent. So like an example might be, I know we talked about traffic laws before, but maybe the military, the way you take orders in the military, it's like, okay, so somebody is higher up than me, so I take orders from him and then I give orders to somebody that's below me. In the military, where that's like it's everybody agrees on that, that's more extroverted thinking. But like the introverted thinking version of that is like these people are going around doing that with their own system of logic. So it's like they've designated, okay, this person is above me, so I'm going to listen to, I am below that person, and this type of person's below me. But it's all subjective. So it's not something like the military where people are assigned ranks and everybody agrees on that and it's objective. It's like subjective to them. So, and it's guided by extroverted sensation, so maybe skill. So say, I don't know, say you're an athlete and you're playing soccer, or you're a pitcher in baseball. So you'll think about somebody differently if you're a pitcher and they're a better pitcher. That might be a logical designation for them. Like this person is, logically this person is a better pitcher. So they might even consider that person a better person because they're better at that, at that action. And you're gonna notice that. So like when you're talking to somebody like this, at first maybe it's like not super obvious, but then after a while it's like super obvious that they approach everything like this through their own thinking lens. Every single thing is approached that way. So the main difference here between ISTP and ESTP is that for ISTP the explanation comes first. So everything flows from the explanation, whereas with ESTP everything flows from the concrete sensing fact. And then, so we talked a little bit about extroverted thinking and like the structure of the military, how, if somebody has a rank higher than you like take orders. I know that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but it's like if somebody's above you, they're given a specific rank, which entitles them to do certain things. And everybody agrees on that. That's like more extroverted thinking stuff. So they might make use of, thinking that uses clear rules that everyone can agree on. That's an extroverted thinking thing. These are rational decisions that everybody can understand as objective and rational decisions. It's not really open to interpretation the same way introverted thinking considerations are. They're not as subjective. So in other words, these people, the difference with ESTP is that these people, and I have written here on the slide, these people occasionally are going to focus on practical decision making that's guided by personal convenience. So it's different from ESTP, where the purpose of sorting things out and talking about things and having a logical discussion or a rational discussion was to set themselves at ease. The thinker, so the ESTPs are sensors, the thinkers are going to make practical decisions that are following their own personal convenience. So they're not talking about practical things to set themselves at ease. They're making decisions so that they can be at ease. And another big difference between the thinker here and the sensor, so the ISTP and ESTP, is that, as I've said, with the ISTP, they're going to be, everything's going to flow from the explanation or how they explain things to themselves. And they've really got a tendency to focus on concrete information that's gathered by the five senses. So they're really going to be focused on their sensation over alternate perspectives. So they're not really going to want to be exploratory in their conversation, and they're not going to trust an alternate perspective that they haven't, made physical contact with. So they're not really going to, if you tell them a story, or if you tell them give them an opinion or a perspective about something that they haven't actually been directly involved in, they're most likely not going to be very trustful of that. And along with that, they're not going to be the person in the group that is the one coming up with the alternate perspectives, or coming up with new trends out of nowhere, or something that no one else thought of. They're not really going to be that person. That's generally very unlikely. Instead, you're more likely to find them to be somebody that is very down to earth, and they take things as they are, or as they seem to be. That's what you can expect from these people. But they're not, you can't really approach them with something that they haven't had any direct experience with it, or they're just gonna, they're not going to be very trustful of it. And it's like, that's something that it's very, from, one point of view, it's kind of hard to look down on that, because it's like, okay, well, if you don't have any physical experience with something, why are you talking about it? And that's the way they feel about it. They like to stick to things that are tried and true, and things that generally work for them and are convenient for them, and they don't have to do a lot of messing around with things and philosophizing, or not even just philosophizing. They don't like to have to do a lot of imagining. So they're not going to envision anything new, really, for the most part, because that's just not something they're focused on. They want to work directly with something, and if it requires some kind of imagination, you might as well look for someone else. So that was the first major difference that you'll notice when you're trying to type somebody, and you're trying to decide whether they're ESTP or ISTP. The ESTPs, they don't really have that much of a problem being imaginative, whereas, ISTPs, it's like their perspective is going to be like very predictable. Whereas with somebody that's ESTP, they might actually surprise you with an alternate perspective, or maybe an unpopular perspective, or something that you haven't thought about. Another big difference is that with ISTPs, remember I was talking about how they, occasionally you'll notice that they can be very practical in their decision making, and it's not always introverted thinking. They make use of extroverted thinking occasionally, and their practical decision making, their extroverted thinking, is surprisingly in the same way that ESTPs, they're surprisingly open-minded. The ISTPs will surprise you in the ways that they're emotionally sensitive. So you can see this in both the clips, but in one of the clips that I'm going to play of ISTPs, I think Clint Eastwood is, I haven't watched it in a while. He's talking about like reasons why he makes movies, and he's saying like, he's like, I want to see if I can appeal to children or something, or if I can make a movie that appeals to children, because I just feel like that's something that I'm passionate about doing. That's a surprising appearance of introverted feeling that you're not really going to notice if you're watching videos of someone that's ESTP, or you're talking to someone that's ESTP. You're not going to get blindsided by things like that. Whereas if you know someone that's ISTP, it's like it's weird, because they're very uptight with their own thinking structure and the way they think things should be. But then they'll have these, I don't want to say soft spots, because that's not really even what it is. It's just weird. Like, you have to watch the clips and you'll see. But it's like they'll have these exceptions that are, very surprising. Okay, so summing up what you're looking for the ISTPs before I play the clips, they're people that are frequently emphasizing their own subjective logical structure, which is guided by concrete observations. And then occasionally you'll hear them making rational decisions, or, going through things thoroughly and rationally. And it's all guided by whatever is convenient for them. And on top of that, a big thing that you'll be able to tell the difference between someone that's ISTP and someone that's ESTP is that someone that's ISTP is just not going to consider as many alternatives as someone that's ESTP. Someone that's ISTP is not going to be as imaginative as somebody that's ESTP, and they're usually not going to come up with new ideas before someone that's ESTP. And if they do come up with ideas, they're basically circular, so it's like something that anyone could have come up with if they just put together things that were already thought about. So yeah, in other words, if you pay attention to this in the clips, if you look out for this, the interviewers will ask them, they're like, okay, so have you considered this, have you considered this perspective? Have you considered what these other people, their viewpoint, or, how they may be approaching something? They're just like, no, I really haven't thought about that, or I think Frank Zappa is a little bit more upfront with it. He's just like, no, I'm not going to bother doing that because what I like to do is what I like to do, and I just want to keep it that way. So it's, in terms of imagination, there's not really much there. But in terms of, being very concrete and creating that way, that's where they shine. But, in terms of being creative with new perspectives, there's not really much there.
Can you, if you had to, or if I asked you to, and if you chose to answer the question, could you sum up Frank Zappa in a few sentences?
Which one?
Frank Zappa, the
industrial strength Frank Zappa?
The industrial strength Frank Zappa.
I'm a person who likes to do what he wants to do and has worked at it for 20 years and can generally do what he wants to do, whether people like it or not. And what I do is designed for people who like it, not for people who don't. And I have no desire to inflict it on people who don't want to consume it. And I'm committed to turning out as much of it as possible for the people who like it. It's there if you like it. If you don't like it, there's all those other names on the list.
What a great attitude. That's neat.
It's called rational thinking.
You have about 10 seconds or less. But you don't... you stay in the character somewhat. You keep a little bit of it with you, but there's a switch that goes in your brain, and when the switch, it's time to step in front of the camera, then you throw another switch.
A lot of people who may be termed Clint Eastwood fans, do you have a perception of what it is they want?
No, I think the only thing they expect is they expect to be entertained, and they're willing to accept variations on the entertainment. I was advised by many people not to do Every Which Way But Loose because that wasn't what my audience expected of me. I said, that's all right, I want to make it anyway. Because there may be some other audience that, or some other elements of the audience, maybe like kids, for instance, who might enjoy that and might reach out and maybe expand the audience, who knows.